evening and welcome to our third St. George EDU Talk, CTE for All, engaging with students, growing businesses, and strengthening our communities. My name is Mike Felton. I'm the superintendent for St. George Municipal School Unit. These EDU Talks have grown out of work with Midcoast School of Technology to expand access to career and technical education, or CTE, to all students. We're partnering with Midcoast to develop a pre-K through 12th grade CTE program, construct a CTE makerspace building next to St. George School. The new building will have a shop for woodworking, boat building, and metalwork, space with 3D printers, laser cutters, CNC routers, robotics, and sewing machines, and a classroom gallery for students to work together and share their work. The building will also be open to the larger community through adult education courses, open shop times, and partnership with local businesses and entrepreneurs. So why are we doing this? Why this project? First, we want to re-engage our students in their learning through hands-on, minds-on projects that matter to them, to their families, and their community. Our parents want their children to have access to CTE. It's a priority for our families and our community. And research shows that students who are immersed in CTE programs are more engaged, more likely to graduate, and have a higher earning potential after graduation. Second, we want to ensure our students have the technical, social, emotional, and creative thinking skills to meet existing labor force demands and create the businesses and industries of the future. And third, we want to strengthen our local economy. We've seen our students, elementary and middle school students, thrive doing hands-on, minds-on learning. And the skills they develop through this learning are desperately needed by local businesses. So we have an opportunity to do right by our kids and build a more diversified and resilient local economy. To date, we've raised about $1.6 million for this project. About $1 million of that has come through private donations, from students who sold eggs on the side of the road to people who wrote checks for $100,000 or more, and everything in between. We've also received grants from private foundations as well as federal grants, including a $250,000 Rethinking Rural Education Ventures, or REV grant. In addition, we have 23 business sponsors who are supporting the project, including the businesses that are on the panel this evening. However, due to higher than expected construction costs, the fundraising continues. The high costs we're seeing are due in part to workforce shortages in the trades and technical fields, exactly the issue we're working to address for the CTE Makerspace project, an irony which is not lost. So we're here tonight to talk with education and business leaders about how expanding access to CTE can benefit our students, our workforce, and our community. For us, expanding access to CTE isn't optional. We believe it's what we need to do for our students in our community. We believe it's the future of public education. So you tell I get a little excited and fired up when I talk about this. So now I'm going to transition into a moderator role. And to help me do that, I'm gonna sit down over here. So I'm very grateful to the panelists that we brought together tonight, representing both education and businesses. So first to my left is Paul Meinersman. He's the Technology and Makerspace Director of St. George School. He's been one of the visionaries and driving forces behind the CTE Makerspace project. Paul's led our Makerspace initiative since 2016 and worked with teachers from across grade levels to incorporate new and traditional tools and technologies into student learning. Jamie McCaffrey is the 4th grade teacher at St. George School. She's led our work to integrate Makerspace technologies such as 3D printers and computer-aided design, as well as makerspace thinking, like understanding that failure is often the precursor to success, into the mainstream classroom. Bobby Deachin is the director of Midcoast School of Technology. Bobby and I have talked for years about expanding access to CTE. Those talks help me understand how CTE can help transform education. Bobby and Midcoast have been our partners since we hatched the idea for the CTE Makerspace project. Chip Bauer is the owner of Harbor Builders Associates, a general contracting firm with deep roots in St. George. Chip and Harbor Builders have been supporters of the CTE Makerspace building since the early days of the project. He's helped me better understand the challenge employers are facing finding skilled workers and how that's impacting businesses. Bettina Dolden owns and operates 5 Builders and Architects, a custom design and build business in Rockport. When I met Bettina this fall, we had a wide-ranging conversation about education, economics, and the trades. She explained some of the macroeconomic forces that are impacting or will impact main businesses. She helped me see more clearly how this work that we're doing fits into the bigger picture and has relevance for all schools. Steve Ladd is the president and CEO of Steel Pro. Steel Pro is a remarkable operation, an employee-owned company that manufactures custom stainless steel tanks to firms across the country. Steve was an immediate supporter of the project and helped me understand some of the opportunities and challenges manufacturers are facing. Gary Minery, with his wife Shasta, started GC Minery Plumbing and Heating in 2006. The residents of St. George were very involved with the school and community. Seeing the success of Gary's company with the Minneapolis services, made clear to me the opportunity the trades could provide for students to make a good living while staying in their community. Gary's work also demonstrates the mechanical and engineering skills that go along with plumbing and heating work, something many kids and adults don't always appreciate. So I'll be asking the panel questions until around 7. I'll be checking my phone just to see the time. I'm not texting or surfing the internet or anything. And then we'll give all of you, our audience, both in person and online, time to ask questions. We'll get to as many of your questions as possible in the time that we have available. All right, so I'll jump right into the questions. And Chip, I'd like to start with you. I'll prep you for this.
You're the first one on the list.
I didn't think you followed it.
No, I think he was going to follow it.
A little surprise. This is good. So could you tell us a little bit about your company and how it's been impacted by a shortage of skilled workers? Is it harder now to find skilled workers than it was 20 years ago? And why do you think that is?
So I'm with Harbor Builders. I joined Harbor Builders in '94. I was actually a carpenter with them in '84. And then I became a partner. There was 3 other partners, 4 of us total. And in that time, I'm now the sole owner of it. I miss my partners, I miss the crew that we had. And we've been located since 1978 down on the St. George Peninsula. And it used to be if there was a fire or some kind of incident in that, half of our crew would stand up. So 1 of 2 of them here, that would take off and go in that. It was a big part of community. And today I have about 17 employees and 1 lives down in St. George. And great young, thank God. I'm going to be with us for a long time, but we just need more. And anecdotally, we work with Gary all the time, only with Gary for the most part, the best we can. And then, but it used to take about 8 to 10 months to build a house, 2,500 square. It now takes approximately 12 to 14 months to do that same house because there's fewer electricians, fewer people tiling, all of that thing, it's not blamed on COVID. In answer to your question, where did it start? It didn't start back then. It started 2008. We saw a huge transition out of the state of workers when the recession, the financial issue hit, and nobody's been filling that gap since then. It just really felt it strongly. So it's been just a nice steady decline. So I use the word nice, so I don't find it that. So it's been a steady decline of workers. We offer a lot, I feel, no different than Phi. And
Phi spends a lot of time respecting everything you do every day. So we know who the good guys are.
Exactly. It's just trying to hire people in that. It's good pay and it's good benefits in that, but they are just few and far between. I love this place here, by the way. I used to be on the board 10, 15 years ago when Dan Dishner was here. And it was the old facility. This is very good. So that's it. That's a little snapshot of my end of it and that, but it is impossible to find workers. We had 47 total, I'd say, when I had 3 other partners back in '98. And like I said, 17 today. Wow.
Thanks, Chip.
Thank you.
I invite the panelists if something that someone says brings them to mind that you want to add in, please do. When we want to watch the time, but I think it's good to have conversation between you while you're up there. So Bettina, I'd like to move to you next and sort of zoom out a little bit. And, could you talk a little bit about some of the economic changes taking place at the national level that will impact Maine's economy and workforce, especially in regards to the trades and technical fields.
I thought about how to answer this without going into a 30-minute TED talk. First of all, I'm going to start with I think. This is my view. I think this is how I think we're going to be looking at things for the next period of time. I think the two most important things on a macro level that are going to impact the U.S. economy, the U.S. socioeconomic situation, and Maine are one, demographics, and two, the end of the secular cycle of low inflation and cheap capital that fueled consumer spending and capital markets. On the demographic side, we are looking at a period, if you look at any census data and all of the statistics, we have an aging demographic, baby boomers moving into that post 65-year-old phase. What was interesting is their statistics that post 2008, the Great Recession, the financial collapse, all of the workforce growth was in people 55 and above. Okay, I know, bummer, right? The challenge with that statement is we are now another 14 years past that, and that demographic is that much older, and this time they really want to retire. After 2008, we believed that they came back into the workforce because their economic situation had been damaged by the financial collapse. So they came back in. It's now a little bit tougher to expect that that's where we're going to tap back in for workforce growth versus 2008. On top of that, our birth rates are declining. And so we are now looking at fewer people coming into that 15 and above workforce growth. This is a US statistic. And so I looked straight at the population and demographics of the US, and then of course you go out globally and it's a bigger problem. It's a global problem, really. And when you start to think about how demographics impact economies, socioeconomic situations, inflation, economy, all of those kind of things, it hits all layers of industry and everything, how we're going to deal with housing, healthcare. Are we going to end up with multi-generational housing? Again, how does that impact the workforce? So there's multiple elements of that. And then on the end of the secular, it's been a 30-year trend of having low inflation and cheap capital. I believe that we're at the end of that for a lot of reasons. And on top of that, the cheap capital over the last 30 years that was fueling consumer spending and the capital markets is now really going to be needed for infrastructure rebuild. We are really starting to see big announcements of projects, which I think is exciting for this conversation, into the US of resourcing manufacturing back into the US and working capital investments. And when you feel that capital pull, that capital is going to be needed for other uses than for cheap capital for consumer spending and capital markets. That was better than I did last time, right?
Yeah,
Come on.
I had the 30 minutes.
That
was pretty good.
I think he looked at me after about 45 minutes when he came to the office and went, oh dear. Okay. All right. So hold on a second. I'm going to pull this together. Ready? Maine will be impacted by these trends. And the reality is all of those create challenges and incredible opportunities. And so, like anything, if you can start to look at this, what are the opportunities? And the reason that I think this is really exciting when you look at this kind of environment, I believe that we're going to be in a 10-year period where we have got to adapt massively. Business models, how we do things, all of these. And if we can have students and the future have engaged thinkers who are solution oriented and adaptive thinkers, I think that is going to be terrific for Maine and for everybody.
I think it's pretty powerful to think about how Chip painted a picture of the challenge we're facing right now in the local community in terms of shortage of skilled workers. And then you also see that things are going to keep changing and that we're going to have to continue to adapt. And it's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity.
I think the demographic thing, you look at if you read it, if you study any of the census thing, this is not a short-term fix. We are really going to have to think about this as a long cycle. You know, Fed Chair Powell, Larry Summers, all of these people, this is what they're most focused on as far as the economic impact. So, yes.
I'm curious, do you not see any impact from climate migration from other parts of the country coming north?
I actually, if you start, wow, let's see. I actually think, I think you probably have read the report that is multiple years open. That smile that goes the Midwest up to the Northeast, I think is probably going to be over time. I think that's probably going to be one of Maine's biggest marketing tools, quite frankly. You're seeing the articles, you know, even today, Arizona is shutting down development west of Phoenix because there is no water. Did anybody see that article today? You know, I think the water issue is a big deal. And, you know, think about who the really wealthy people and where they have bought up land over the last 20 years and look at where they've bought it. There's been articles, and it dates back a long time, and I'm forgetting the reference, and I apologize for that. I can find it and send it to you. There's a great article years ago that from the Midwest up to the Northeast was going to be where we were all going to migrate to over time. I assume that's what you're referring to.
And I just wondered how that, I mean, that is one of the big opportunities. It also could be, I mean, it's not all going to be sunny because that's going to put other pressures on us. But it seems to me that is going to affect those lower birth rates. So,
Well, and remember, migration, immigration, all of these things are a really big deal for population growth. I was talking on a broad US basis, but you're right. Think about short term, what we've seen in migration in the United States, and look at what that has meant for short term economic benefit. Then what it means for leveraging and taxing the infrastructure and all those kind of things. Do I believe that if we were to sit here 10 years from now, could Maine be a net beneficiary of migration trends in the US? I think so. We have to get people thinking that we want to welcome people to Maine for that and be prepared for that possibility. And housing. You and I are going to figure out how to build housing at lower cost per unit, sir.
I'm with you.
So I just
You know?
ask if people can just, I love the questions. If we can just hold those, we're gonna have a Q&A at the end. Oh, it's fine. I just want to make sure we get to hear from all of the candidates. But yeah, please, like, you know, write down the questions, say the questions. I do want to call them at the end. So it sounds like we're gonna need some systematic changes or some changes to our systems that are in place. So let's talk
Aren't you
about.
teaching the students to do that for us?
We're
Us old
working on-
folks, you need to put us out to pasture so the young kids can deal with it.
We're on it. So speaking of that, I'd like to talk to the next question for you, Bobby, talking about what is career and technical education. And from your perspective as a CT educator, why are there a shortage of students entering the trades, and do you see that changing?
Yeah, so first, welcome to Minko School of Technology. And when we look at career and technical education transitioning from the traditional vocational education model that a lot of people in this room probably are familiar with or thought about when they were in school, to a place where it's been infused with a lot of different options for students. And that really took place when the federal government and the state government came in and said, we need to start to have a common direction across the board at all the technical schools in the country. So we started to look at federal and state standards, industry recognized standards from organizations that said, this is what we need to start seeing from people entering the trades across the board. And when that took place, it gave options to students in a lot of different directions. It gave them opportunities to start earning concurrent enrollment credits, dual enrollment credits, where they're a high school student and a college student. And Suzanne Hall, who's in the audience today, is one of the biggest reasons why we have so many in this school. That students can earn those credits while they're sitting in all of our programs. They don't have to do anything really extra. They're here with us. And then they also are earning industry recognized credentials. And that's one of the biggest things. And I think for a lot of our students, they don't understand the value of those credentials when they leave here. To walk through the door and say, I have this certificate, you know, what can it do for me? we're having students that are leaving our place and they're getting an extra $2 or $3 an hour compared to somebody that doesn't have that certification, right? And they're 18 and 19 years old. We have students that are leaving here with their main guide's license at 18. You know, it's incredible with what they have. And that transition really took place, it started to take place with Carl Perkins Act. And now when it's in its 5th iteration, it really is pushing schools to the max and to look at what potential we can really explore and take it to even another level. And I think when you're looking at CT across the board, it is a place that everyone is looking at and saying, what can we do to help and how can we provide that support? As far as the number of students entering the CT pathway or just training in general, Steve and I were having a conversation before this started, and a lot of it takes place in our schools, in the conversations that we're having with students at a young age. You know, for me, it was the big 4 that I heard about. I had 2 parents that were teachers, and the conversations that I had were around law, business, education, and medicine. We didn't talk about what it was like to be a welder or a contractor or a machinist or an auto technician. We didn't have those conversations. And unfortunately, when we're doing career exploration units in schools, we're not having those conversations. Very rarely do you see a welder walk through the door of an elementary school to have a conversation with students, even though the majority of those 6 or 7-year-olds would be thrilled to check out Steel Pro or Fisher or whoever, right? And that to me is just lost. And when you're looking at conversations happening around a dinner table, they become fewer and fewer as students get older, right? In middle school, now we start to have basketball practice or theater practice. High school, forget it. I mean, having everyone in the same room is almost impossible. But when they're 6, 7, 8 years old and they come home and say, you wouldn't believe what I just saw in class today, or the field trip that we took, everyone is a captive audience at that dinner table to listen to that 6 or 7-year-old be really excited. So to me, that's a fundamental change that we have to look at and make in order to really improve things.
And I think part of that's what has driven us to have students experience the trades and technical fields when they're in pre-K, when they're in kindergarten, when they're in 1st grade. We're adamant, you can't wait to 11th grade to talk to a student about opportunities in trades and technical fields. You'll catch some, but you'll lose a lot more. So I think those conversations are part of the shift. And when we get to the end, Jamie's going to talk a little bit more of the impact. Thank you, Bob. So Gary, you've been the owner and operator of a successful plumbing and HVAC company for more than 10 years. Can you tell us about the path you followed from high school that led you to becoming a small business owner in trades?
So I started, when I got out of high school, I started lobstering. I did that for a few years. And then I had to find work through the winter. And then I ended up at Maritime Energy. I worked there for about a year. I'm very mechanical, like to do stuff like that. And I wound up going to AM Plumbing and Heating, and I worked with Andy McMillan for about 6 years, and then started my own business in 2006. I think this is a great opportunity to get kids involved in this. It's so hard right now to find anybody to work. It's extremely difficult. Even like places like Maritime Energy, Dead River, all these other places are all very, they're just searching for people. And I'm just so thrilled that we've got something like this to get kids involved, and especially like Bobby said, being so young, that's really where it needs to start. Sure.
Gary, have you seen over your time in plumbing and HVAC the increasing challenge to find workers? Like, has that gotten worse over time, or has it been pretty difficult all the way through?
I think it's definitely gotten worse. 10 years ago, it's fairly simple. You could find somebody. Now, even when you go to the supply house right now, it's everybody's my age. There are no young people. There are very few and far between. I don't know if it's just the persona of a plumber, all they do is plunge a toilet, because that's really not what it is. But somehow we have to get younger people involved in this. And I think this is a perfect avenue to do this, especially with, if you can get younger people in, you know, and show them, especially the mechanical and engineering part.
I think part of what we want to do is each year a class will visit a contractor or a manufacturer, someone in the trades or technical fields. And we think part of the power of that, if they go on site and they see Gary doing the work and, you know, designing and engineering different heating systems and cooling systems, like their vision of a plumber is going to be much different than what it would be if you talk to them about being a plumber and electric.
Well, and then the entrepreneurial element of it has to come in also.
Right.
I mean, listen
Right.
to this. This is, I mean, especially up here in the mid-coast of Maine, so many people that are in these fields are business owners, entrepreneurs, all of those kind of things. And boy, that brings a whole different accountability, responsibility, opportunity, you know?
I think it's an interesting competitive advantage in some ways that rural communities that have a history and value for the trades and fishing may have, because I think in our community, there's a deep value for the trades and for hands-on work and for applying your mind and your hands to solve problems. There is an entrepreneurial spirit built in. I mean, every lobsterman is their own business owner. So I think in some ways we're uniquely situated if we can tap into that for it to be a competitive advantage in the future. Thank you, Garrett. So Paul, you've been the technology makerspace director at St. George School for more than 7 years. First, what's a makerspace? And then second, how did that program help shape the vision for the CT makerspace building project?
So when I think about a makerspace, there's sort of two things that come to mind. One, it's a physical place that incorporates aspects of a kindergarten classroom, wood shop, and Tesla research and design lab. So all kind of encompassed in one place. So that's, you know, so it's a place where you have access to tools, both, you know, your traditional tools, from hand tools to table saws to more sort of 21st century shop tools like laser cutter, CNC machine, 3D printers, sewing machines that can do all kinds of crazy stuff, robotics, you name it. And then also we've got lots of like duct tape and cardboard to make whatever you can imagine. It's just a great prototyping tool. But then it's also a mindset, and you know, the idea of it being a place where you go to make things. And so, you know, a big part of the way I envision the makerspace is that I want students and community members to come in and develop a belief that they are capable of doing something. So, you know, when I talk to Mike about it, the goal in my mind is to have the makerspace is to get to the point where someone from the community, a student can come in and say, I have an idea, and we can say, yes, we can help you make that happen. Whether we have the tools, we have the knowledge internally, or we have access to community members or other connections that can help, you know, mentor people, help them bring an idea to life. So they can become their own entrepreneurs. So that's sort of the idea of the makerspace. How that has really impacted us at St. George is, you know, when our makerspace first got started, it was because we were given a 3D printer, and we pulled off a couple of projects, and everyone's eyes sort of lit up and said, "Oh, we can do this. We can start to dream." And so we've taken small growth, small steps towards kind of expanding our capabilities, and both in terms of like the tools and the machines that we have, and also like reaching into a classroom, like partnering with Jamie really early on to be like, how do we get these 3D printers so they don't just sit in this room, but they actually get used in classrooms, and not as something like new and additional, but as something that complements or enhances what's already going on in the classroom. And so we've done that in small steps. You know, Jamie's been a great partner. See someone that's been able to like sort of take on 3D printing, and I don't really have to like come in and help with that anymore, which is awesome for her and her students, and awesome for me because I can do other stuff. And then it allows us to create for students those opportunities to create things. And that is just built slowly and slowly and slowly to the point where we don't really have room, right? You know, a big part of this is that we don't have the space to do much of anything. To the point where we're using the shed right now. We're like rearranging the shed so we can move some of the equipment out there so that we have space to use that stuff where we can make a little bit of a mess and it's not next to all my computer stuff that doesn't want sawdust all over it. So the short answer is this makerspace has allowed us to start to dream and to encourage our students to do things that they didn't know they could do.
Well, just a follow-up question. Now you talk to the kids a lot about failure,
Oh, yeah.
how to approach that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I was at a conference a couple years ago, and there was this really well-known speaker in the makerspace community. And she was giving us like, you know, the keynote lecture. And she talked about how she was trying to eliminate the word failure from her vocabulary. And as soon as that like Zoom ended and she was off, I said, I think she's wrong, because I think that we need to talk about failure because failure is normal. Like I tell kids, like when you were learning the walk, you failed all the time and it was no big deal. You're like, oh, I fell down. Okay, I'm going to try that again. But we have to instill that comfort with pushing ourselves and failing so that failing becomes a normalized process of growth. If we aren't willing to take risks and to try new things, we won't grow and we won't be able to figure out solutions to the problems we're having.
And I think that ability to fail is even more important now because we're at a point where we don't know what the next step is. Like things are changing so quickly. Our whole, our population demographics, our economy, our communities are changing. So we're going to get it wrong more than we're going to get it right. So if our kids don't have that ability, they're not going to, or don't feel comfortable in that. It's going to be really hard for them to come up with solutions.
But don't, sorry, I'm with the person that you said you completely disagree with.
Yeah.
I think success and failure as words, as long as you're still playing the game, are actually bad. Because you know what, as long as you show up to play the game again tomorrow, you're still in it. You haven't failed. You get to keep learning. You learn from yesterday and you play the game again. Failure has an absolute turn to it. Success has an absolute element to it. I'm with the person that you disagreed with on the podium.
Well, I think
Sorry.
part of it is that for so much kids, like they take a test or whatever, they don't get a good grade and they say, I'm a failure. And they internalize that as like,
Bad.
it's bad. And what I want them to recognize is, no, so you fail now. What can you learn? How can you grow from here? Like, okay, learn from that experience because you're going to have so many times where something doesn't go right. And you have a choice to be like, I'm a failure, or you can say, I failed. And what can I learn from that? And so that's why I want to talk about failure, because so that students will destigmatize it and look at it as it's just part of the process.
Can I piggyback on that? So one of our 5 core values is courage, and we have this conversation the first day of school with all of our students that they will fail. And it's the first time that they've heard that in quite a while. And they're going to be using equipment that's going to put them in an uncomfortable situation, and they have to go for it. And we have a shared student here from St. George, and he's in our composites class. And I can tell you this, walking through the door, because he had that experience with the equipment at St. George, taking risks in an environment that it was okay to make a mistake and mess up and learn from that mistake. He walks into our classroom in our shop and it's like, this is a playground that I can just explore. And now's my chance to make those mistakes before I walk into a job. And then it means my job if I do fail or make that mistake. It's really that learning process for us. The K-12 education system, it becomes uncool to make a mistake in what, 4th, 5th grade? If we could have that carry into the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade before they step out of our little bubble, that would be great.
I think it's interesting the conversation because I think part of what you're taking away, what we're all talking about is the finality of failure and success.
Right.
That it is part of a process. So you don't ever get to say I'm done, for better or worse in some way. So you're always on this process. So next question is for Steve. And Steve, could you tell us a little bit about Steel Pro some of the labor force challenges you face and how you've addressed those challenges.
Sure. First, I wanted to just thank you, Mike, for bringing us here tonight. This is so important for all of us here on the panel and for our community. So thank you very much for bringing us here. So Steel Pro, we've been here in Rockland since 1978. We're a manufacturer of ASME pressure vessels, stainless steel tanks, vacuum chambers, anything made out of steel or stainless steel or an exotic alloy that can be welded together. Steel Pro manufactures that. Some of the markets we serve are pharmaceutical, biopharm work. We do a little bit of pulp and paper, even though that's a shrinking market these days. Food and beverage, and we do a lot in the fine chemical and alternative energy fields. We currently have 52 employees, and we're 100% employee owned. So the challenges are, we're not unique. We face the same challenges as what you've heard some of the panelists already talk about tonight. Steel Pro hires estimators, project managers, mechanical engineers, quality inspectors, welders, fabricators, general laborers. By far, the biggest challenge is welders and fabricators. So we hire engineering staff or quality staff. We really don't it's not nearly as difficult to hire for those positions as it is for welders and fabricators. And the welders and fabricators are the lifeblood of what we do. Without them, we build no products. Every product we manufacture needs fabrication and needs a welder. Traditionally, that's our limiting factor. I've been with the company for 27 years, and for 27 years, that's limited our growth. So we are limited by the number or the capacity of welders and fabricators we have in our facility. So how have we addressed the challenges? This is going to be a little bit different than the theme that you've heard here tonight. We certainly have had some good success. We became an ESOP, employee owned in 2014. And shortly after that, we committed a lot of energy into how to expand our workforce in the trades. So over the last 4 years, we've grown our workforce about 15%. Our average age, we've actually lowered, that's at 37. And our tenure is over 10 years, average tenure. So those are three statistics that you're probably not hearing very often in this current economy or this current labor force deficit. So how do we do that? First and foremost, we had to be a great employer. That almost goes without saying, but you have to be one of the best employers and provide great opportunities. And we recruited like everybody else. So we recruited on Indeed, radio ads, all of those standard ways that you're trying to attract new help, and we would get 0 people. I mean, so we quickly came to the conclusion that trying to take an employee from another employer is not going to work. So where are we going to find these new people, these new talented people? It's secondary and post-secondary schools. So we've really changed our focus, and that's where we put our energy, is to hiring people out of high school or out of post-secondary. So we targeted EMCC and Beale and Washington County, and didn't really put a lot of focus on high school. Just our thinking there was, well, they're not going to be where we need them to be.
So we really didn't pay a lot of attention to that. And we had great success. We were getting 1 or 2 new employees out of Eastern Maine or out of Beal's program or out of Washington County's technical school. And then we connected with Kevin McKenney at Waldo County, who is the same as Midcoast School of Technology in the Belfast area. And so I'll use that connection as an example of our success. So Kevin runs the welding program at Waldo County, and we've hired 8 of his graduates over the last few years. And so doing that, we said, okay, we got to figure out it's not something in the water up there. What's going on? Why is he producing such a great welding student? So we spent some time really looking at that, and so there was a few key things that we realized. One is Kevin and that whole program, they really acknowledged and supported that 18-year-old high school graduates can be very employable. And that was key. And everybody really supported that. And on top of that, Kevin was preparing these students for a career at 18 years old when they graduated, and creating an environment that was much like a shop environment. And when I say that, it's not the space or the equipment or the welding machines, that all has to be there. But it really was the soft skills that he was doing just naturally because of his background. He was really running that classroom as he was a great shop foreman. So the students were learning time management. They were learning that there's a quality expectation. They were thinking independently. They had to work as a team. Accountability. All these things were infused in the program up there. And when we connected with that, we really just gravitated towards it. As you can see, we hired 8 of his high school graduates over the last few years. And these students are amazing. They're hardworking, they're forward thinking, and great welders to boot, but just great young people. So there is hope to find people out of Midcoast School of Technology or some of the other programs. I think we as from industry have to really invest in that process. So allowing us to have this opportunity to become more a part of it is key to facing this challenge.
I think public education has to really invest in that process as well. In some ways, it's a re-envisioning. It's interesting. I've talked to a lot of different organizations that do grants, whether it be public or private. Sometimes they'll say, well, this is what we're trying to do. And they're like, well, we fund workforce development. We don't fund public education. And I'm like, well, that distinction right there is a problem. Because if I'm not saying public education is just workforce development, but if it isn't workforce development, then we've got something really backwards here. But I think that mindset is part of what's holding back. And I didn't have to try to convince the people on the phone, like, no, this is workforce development. Like, you don't want to wait till somebody's 30 to start teaching them these skills. It's a lot easier when they're 5 and 6 and all the way through. So I think, thank you, Steve. I think that's a great transition to Ms. McCaffrey. And so you've taught 4th grade at St. George School for more than 7 years. Prior to that, you taught 3rd through 6th grade classes in neighboring districts. You've been one of the biggest supporters of the CTE Makerspace project. Why? Why does CTE matter to students and teaching elementary school?
A great question. When you think of CTE, you don't think of little kids typically. But I'm one of those teachers. When Paul brought in that 3D printer, my eyes lit up and I was so excited. And my students were too. So Paul brought that to me and I said, okay, what can we do? And me and my students would send all of the work to Paul. And within the next year, I had 3D printers in my classroom and we were doing the work. And every year I learn from my kids. And I think you're talking about the success and failure. It's important for them to see that I don't know everything and that they can teach me something. No matter what, the program changes a little bit this year, and now we're using iPads and not Chromebooks. So it's a whole new learning curve for me, and the kids pick it up just like that. It's so they see that I can make mistakes and learn from it and still be successful. So that's pretty great for them. When we had the 3D printers in the classroom and they're working, you would think it'd be distracting. It is at first. But I can remember very clearly the first year in my room, one of the girls was like, "This is so satisfying." And that's why it brings excitement to the students. We're teaching them how to persevere. It's not going to be easy. They have to learn how to work together and be responsible. So all the skills that they need to be a successful community member, they're learning starting in pre-K. The problem solving skills, I think, is the hardest part. Kids want to answer right away. This is how you're going to do it. And these are the steps. That's not how it works. So we have to try and try again and print again or build. And when you have the final product, it makes it all worth it. When you think of having a maker mindset, it's really exciting. It's exciting. Paul comes with these great ideas and I want to incorporate them right away, but having to remember I have all these other standards that have to be taught as well. So, but what's really great is that everything that we have to teach for reading and writing and math and science can all be supported in the makerspace. And the excitement of learning is the most important thing.
I think both Jamie and Paul are part of a group of teachers that are our CTE curriculum team, and they're working to develop a pre-K through 8th grade CTE curriculum. And they've really stressed trying to focus that on integrating the tools, the technology, the mindset into the existing curriculum projects that teachers already have going on. And then going to work with Bobby and Midcoast on that. And we're going to bring in some industry partners as well to help inform that work. I think, Jamie, the other day you were telling me about one of the students in your class who was excelling at 3D design. Can you talk about that real quick?
Yeah. I can think of every year that I've done 3D printing, there's always one student who kind of stands out, like who can teach the class on it. They just pick it up right away. And I have a student this year who keeps asking me every day, when do we get to do this again? When is it coming up? I'm like, next week, we're doing it next week. But he can explain to the class exactly how to do, oh, that's not working, try this. And it's just come natural to him. So that's pretty exciting to me. And it's nice to have an expert in the classroom that kids can go to. That's not me. That's pretty nice. And Paul doesn't have to come in to do all the troubleshooting at this point. So it's pretty spectacular.
It was
I wasn't saying that. And one of the things that's neat is that like the kids that become really aware of how things work in the 3D printing environment are not necessarily the kids who stand out in their regular day-to-day. Like it allows us to give those kids whose brains work differently than how we've told them to for the last 30 years. Because we don't assess for like spatial reasoning or for like understanding how things work in a three-dimensional space. We don't assess for that in school typically. And so those kids have often been left behind, or their skills have not been something that we have assessed for, so they haven't been things we valued. And so this allows those kids who like understand things to shine.
Yeah, there was an article in the New York Times, I think it was in the late summer, fall, just about this. And it said the schools specialize in assessing verbal and quantitative reasoning. We fail at assessing spatial reasoning. But guess what? Engineering, mechanics, that's majority spatial reasoning. So we're losing all of these kids. The article was about how that's impacting our kids and our economy. Because we're losing thousands, who knows how many potential engineers every year. And the example we always give is to see how early this happens. We had a student who was in 5th grade. The mother called me up, she said, Mike, I can't get him to go to school. He just doesn't want to go to school. And he had a great teacher. It was a small class, like 15 kids. We got a pretty engaging curriculum. And he she couldn't get him out of bed. So we ended up connecting him with Paul, where he got to go in and design and create things in the 3D printer. Like the first thing he did was a model V8 engine, something like that. And he did ongoing projects with Paul. And he started to come to school. The days he had Paul, started to come to school the other days. We didn't necessarily have Paul. And later in the year, the mother was talking to her two boys, and her older son, was, I think 8th grade at the time. And she said, what do you want to do? And they said, well, I want to go to Midcoast and study diesel mechanics. And she looked at her other son, the 5th grader, who before wouldn't get out of bed to go to school. And she asked him, what do you want to do? And he paused and said, I want to be an engineer. And then he walked up the stairs. So that's a kid, if we kept doing what we were doing, we probably would have lost that kid. And that's 5th grade. So I think that's just part of it. Say why elementary, that's part of the reason. So I know I've seen hands going up. I don't know if the panel wants to say anything else before we go to Q&A. All right. So I saw some hands going up, and so what I'd like to do is, if you have a question, just raise your hand. I'm gonna start with the in-person audience, and then I'll go to the Zoom audience, and Crystal and Kristen will let me know who's got the next question. If you're on Zoom, you can use the raise your hand icon. Just raise your hand if we can see you, or put something in the chat box that you'd like to be called on. And Crystal and Kristen will keep a list of that, and we'll just sort of go back and forth. But I want to start with the in-person audience. Are there any questions here? Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, we use the term fail, first attempt in learning, and it hits home with the kids. And I didn't want to ask any questions. I just wanted to say, I graduated from here in 1979. Thank you guys for all your help. And I did small boat, I did boat vessel operations, I did welding and CDL, and walked away with all kinds of really great training. And from there, I went on to the Navy, worked with the Antarctic program, started flying ROVs for Bob Ballard and Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, a couple of others, and came back home. We've been teaching kids and sending them off to do some of the same things that I've done. And so one of the things that I really like about talking to kids is getting them excited about what we can do for them and where we can send them. And I think that I've worked with you guys in St. George a couple of times, and it's really cool to see them light up when you tell them where you might be able to go. And I think that's something that would be a big push for someplace like here and St. George and any other educational organization. So thanks for putting me into a good place.
Thank you very much. Online, do you have anybody?
Not yet.
Yeah,
I'd like
go
to
ahead.
say something. I've been in CTE for probably how many years? 40 years. And my passion is to get kids in elementary school into CTE, to get them to experience it. My thesis, I've said this before, when I was doing my master's, was about raising aspirations. And what I found was, if you get kids as a kindergartner in a shop, they're going to have a whole different perspective. And because I'd never welded before, when I worked here at Midcoast School of Technology, I went to the welding teacher and I said, can I try it? And I just remember when I put that hood on and put the hood down. And then I talked to a student that was in the class and I said, what do you like about this? And he goes, I just lose time. I don't even know time is going on when I'm doing this. And so they gave me the welding thing, and I did the bead. I even remember the word. This is one bead, and then had to take the slag off. Correct.
Correct.
Yeah. So I'm hitting the slag, and I'm hitting the slag, and I'm hitting the slag. And I'm thinking, and I like to envision the people that do this as a job and oh my gosh, it was so hard. And then the welding instructor came over and he said, okay, this is how you do the bead. And I just was so excited. And I thought, I can imagine a kid doing this, because when he hit that bead, it just fell off like, it was like a caterpillar. It just fell off. And I was like, it was amazing experience.
and it's a safe place for our kids to have these experiences before they ever, I mean, you can have a third grader go in a welding booth. It's the only place that is safe risk taking. That's my passion. And you can tell I'm still pretty passionate about it. But this is amazing. This is what I dreamed.
Steve, you still looking for welders?
Yeah, yeah. I made a note.
And I just remember he left me for a few minutes because he needed to go to the students. And I was like, what do I do with this? Because I was afraid that I would set something on fire. And so I set it on but it was just, I was like a kid. And that's how and we can have third graders come in and do that. I had no idea, because I'm the same way. I'm like, Bobby, my parents talked to me about teacher, medical, and I ended up teaching CTE, but I loved it. I love it. It's an amazing place. It is. And the best place to start is in the lower grades. It is.
Is and the welding is in particular is, I think, inspiring to young people because it's half art and half science.
Oh,
So someone with a very creative, artistic mind and some hand-eye coordination, it can be very exciting for young people.
but electrical is the same. I mean, electrical, at one time I thought I was going to get my electrical license. I had my helper's license then I saw the code book and I was like, as I love to read, but you don't read the code book. And so even in electric, I mean, there's so many exciting places, the boat building, and now cosmetology is now being opened up for people, for kids, and but composites, boat building, it's amazing. It's amazing. It is amazing. And I've had students there's a school I work with in Bangor that they had a student graduate from high school and the next day they got their associate's degree at Eastern Maine Community College. And our kids can do that here, but we need to get them, you know what I mean? We need to catch them. So
My oldest son
my
went
husband
here
does the same thing.
and for welding and got certified through here. And now he's an engineer over at the Maine Maritime, and that gave him such a jump over some of the other kids where you have to take the first welding class there because he already knew it, and it was because of this place.
So you're saying, just make sure everybody can hear that. So your son took welding here.
Yep.
And then that gave him a jump when he went to Maine Maritime. Yep.
But you have to hook them. You have
Inspire.
to. Yeah, and get them in here to see it and just.
Well, I think, is it Matt and then Jolene?
Thanks so much. Bobby referred to Perkins 5 legislation from the federal government. What's really cool about that legislation is identify specific marginalized groups that we have to by law recruit to CTE. Marginalized groups, let's just take one of them, two individuals with a IEP, special education, learning difference. Who are in the foster care system and they're aged out. We're going to concentrate on the kiddos with learning differences. This is a question for everybody. CTE is going to have a whole bunch of wonky kids coming through the door. Kids with dyslexia, kids with PEDs, kids with ADHD and stuff like that. How prepared are you as industry leaders to provide a safe workplace, provide the training and support for these kids who gain an IRC between a marginalized group and a quote unquote regular kid is the same, but they have to pass the same stuff, correct? Right. So how are you going to support these learners who have learning differences, but are able to do the work that you need? Are you prepared to support them?
Oh, I'll jump in.
Yeah.
I'll take the ball. Did everybody on the screen hear the question? I think there was something about if you can hear the question.
I said no.
No?
I can restate.
They can hear the question. I take a lot of pride in creating an environment that is a safe place for my team. Nobody is perfect when they walk in that door. Everybody has strengths and weaknesses, and we try and create an environment and teams and crews and things where you are creating places where people can play to their strengths, and that we make it respectful for people to come with weaknesses. And the fact of the matter is we all have strengths and weaknesses, and you just have to create a safe environment for all of them. So is it a perfect answer for you? But the fact of the matter is, I know how we come at this every single day. And trust me, when you are dealing with people, be it how large your team is, your team, my team is, you are working on this stuff every single day to make sure that it is a good environment for your team. And I think that is part of what you do every day when you run a company. And is it easy some days? Trust me, there are days, the joy that you talked about of producing something where you have something to show, which is what your kids love. I have this that I produce. There are days when doing this part of managing business is not where you go home and go, I'm not sure I moved the ball forward anyway today. But guess what? You have to create an environment where the people who are moving the ball forward are doing it and feel like it's a safe place. You know, cultures of companies, I think, have dramatically changed from when I was at Fidelity Investments, and I adored my time at Fidelity Investments. But trust me, I was there to put the basis points up.
So culture.
That's how I turned out to be such a charming, lovable human being. But, you know, for another day. You go.
So culture is certainly a trigger word for us as well. And again, being employee owned, it allows us to be more people centric with how we approach anything we do in our business. And because we've really targeted kids out of high school or kids out of post-secondary for our new employees, we've had to completely change our whole onboarding process, on the job training process, continuous improvement process to accommodate an 18-year-old person. So with that, it becomes now a very intimate peer-to-peer relationship, not just supervisor to worker relationship. So with our onboarding, we now have a 4-day onboarding process. That person doesn't even strike an arc or go to work for 4 days. And they have a peer mentor throughout that whole 4-day process. So they create a bond to be able to be successful. So people from all walks of life come through our door. And I think we've adapted as employers to be able to make them successful, no matter what their background might be. So, and we pride ourselves on being able to do that. It's driven our turnover rate. We're continuing to drive that further and further down every year, just for doing that. So I think my answer would be yes, we are prepared to be able to accommodate anybody with no matter what their background might be.
ESOPs typically have lower turnover rates, don't they?
They do. Yeah.
Thanks, Betsy. Sounds like you guys have a culture of opportunity.
Definitely.
Do you have a question? I think we got one on that.
Just very quickly, a number of people have referred to the coaching parents did to send them off in various directions. And I'm curious what kind of parent awareness you're doing to help parents start giving new messages earlier. I assume you're doing something.
That's a great question. Parents are definitely aware of what's happening in the classroom. And I think that's going to be also part of our developing curriculum, because it's going to be starting in pre-K. Getting parents aware that we are bringing in professionals into the classroom, and hopefully we'll have some parents go with us on those field trips, and also hopefully we'll have some parents be those professionals. I think that's pretty key. Right now, when we're talking, right now we're learning about animals, for example, and we're able to talk about, okay, what are you going to do if you were excited about animals? What could you do when you get older? And that's the kind of question that might go home in the newsletter, or just, yeah, it's definitely on our radar and will be part of our ongoing curriculum.
And I think also, we don't have the space yet, but my hope is that once we have the space, that not only does it get used, during the school day, but also we have like parent-child opportunities that come in so that the parents can come in and see the space and work with their kids on things that maybe are like less educational, but more fun, and also expose them to other things. And it becomes a place for like, whether it's signage around the building, examples of like, photos from students being on field trips at facilities, so that we can create a place where we're exposing everyone that walks into the building, the fact that people who come to this building have the opportunity to do all of these things. So
I think it's interesting because in some ways, I think the parents have been pushing us that they want these opportunities for their kids. They want the school to adapt to make sure that we are providing these learning opportunities and we're talking about them. So this question online, then I'll jump right back. So this is from Ryan, at Senior Policy Advisor in Governor Mills' office on policy innovation in the future. Great discussion and many examples of why CTE matters. Is there anything the state can do to support this work?
Yeah.
So anybody I have to make it. But does anybody want to? Bobby, you look like you're jumping up and down.
So former Speaker Fecto is a big supporter of CTE and did a lot of supporting in the Biddeford area. And Paul Bono is the director down there, and I know he is 100% behind CTE. And I think a lot of it comes down to the career exploration that students go through when they are in the younger grades, and having a little bit more of a direction when it comes to that for the statewide piece, because a lot of it is really schools have the main learning results that they're supposed to follow with that. But those are quite old at this point. And to revisit that specific part will be very, very valuable for our state.
Could you also talked about the issue of industrial arts and financial? Could you talk about that real quick?
So the majority of us had an opportunity to take some form of industrial arts or home economics while you were in school. And those programs have been going away slowly as time has gone on, and budget constraints have really pushed us into that place. So there's no longer a place to earn your industrial arts certification in the state of Maine. Eastern Maine Community College was working on that for a while. But CTE schools were at capacity. We entered this school year with all of our programs full, with the exception of 1 or 2, and those had maybe a couple of seats in them that were open. We need to be able to provide opportunities for students to explore different career pathways outside of CTE as well, and partner with CTE to do that. So that is one area that we could potentially look for.
I'm just I was thinking of one other thing. It escapes me. It'll come back to me. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Forgive me because I don't know yet a lot about the school system, but I'm curious if you're going to, or if you already have any kind of portfolio assessment process kids go through, or reflective writing, and if that's communicated to parents as part of whatever kind of report card situation you do.
Right, that's a good question as well. We're in the process of developing that actually that's part of the community that we have created. As far as a portfolio, we keep products right now and pictures and all that, and the kids do reflect on their growth in collaboration and perseverance. As far as sharing with parents, we have student-led conferences twice a year where they can share those things, but I think that will get further developed as we dig a lot deeper into this.
So just my experience from the STEAM programs into schools, we found a big difference when we included it on whatever the material that went home.
Right.
Because that's the way to get parents to realize we value this. We value it by how much time we give it in the schedule and the calendar, and consider core curriculum, which I hope you will. But it was really the assessment piece that made parents say, oh,
I think it's my kid who's gonna be, should know this, or it's important. So it really boosted our parent.
One thing I wanted to add was, I think some of the support we could use from the state is, I mean, obviously for our project is partially financial. And, what we're trying to do with this project is not just about St. George, it's about a model for other rural communities. And we really see this bringing together of CTE, pre-K through 12, as well as adult education partnerships with local businesses and entrepreneurs as a model for rural economic development that hopefully then can be exported to other communities. So we hope the state and other funders see it as such, so we can get this off the ground. And I mean, you can see every time we talk about this project, the general reaction we get is, duh, why wouldn't you do that? So, that's a good reaction to get. And we've had a lot of success thus far. We want to finish the job.
Here's a question.
Yeah, good.
About hours during the day. Where in a school day of approximately 67 hours with all of that is spoken about tonight is squeezed into that school day, while traditional critical liberal arts subjects, history, literature, foreign languages, etc., are being taught to every student. Talk about how it's integrated and working with the other modules.
So you just repeat the question for you.
Sure. So how do we integrate all of this, everything else that we need to teach with this, right? That's a huge question that all of the teachers at our school are asking. How are we going to do this? Well, we kind of have already started that process. We follow the expeditionary learning model, where a lot of the curriculum that we're currently using for ELA is already hands-on, and it has a lot of this stuff built in where we're doing community projects, and we are already at the end of each project. Everything is project-based learning, so everything has a final product. And what's been great, we've been doing this curriculum for a few years now, and so we're developing it and creating it for us, making it work for us and our students, and we're able to bring this CTE and makerspace model into that. So all of the critical skills are not going away, like the reading and writing and the math and the history, music and gym class and foreign language. Those are all still there, and they're a huge part. But as teachers, we're collaborating with each other to figure out how to make it all go together. And so if we're working on energy in 4th grade, then we're talking about that in STEAM class, obviously, but figuring out how to integrate that with what they're doing in Spanish class later on, and how can we also integrate that with every other subject. So we're not forgetting anything, we're putting it all together.
And I think to go along with that is figuring out how do we integrate this so that it isn't more work for the teachers. So the one like small example, so the Spanish teacher was taking some 7th and 8th grade students to go meet with a local chef. They were learning about some of the food that's in, I guess it wasn't 7th and 8th grade students, I don't remember what class it is. They're reading the book Esperanza Rising, and then they were making the food. And I said to the teacher, like, a way that you can bring CTE into that is to ask the chef, how did you get to being a chef? Tell us about what your journey was from wherever to where you are now. And so that's that small piece of like career exposure that's really, really easy to add every time we have an expert that's interacting with our students. So we don't just go like, oh, this is how you make this really nifty food. But it's like, how did you get here so that you had the skills to make this nifty food?
Ask your question. Can you elaborate? Like, I think one of the great examples in the 1st grade is a bird module. They can have a project that's for an idea to go along with the students learning about birds.
Yeah, so every year the 1st graders have a big unit where they learn all about birds, and I don't know what all they learn about birds, but I know that historically, like sort of the final product of that is they would draw a picture of whatever bird they were studying, and and it would just like go home. It would be that another piece of paper that went home and got stuck on the fridge. And of course the kids were invested, but they also knew it was just going to be another piece of paper on the fridge. So now what we do is we've been turning that into a fundraiser for either Avian Haven or some other bird places. I don't remember where they did recently, but so they took their drawing and they ultimately make either bookmarks out of them, or they make window hangers so that the birds like have something there so they aren't running into the windows. And so the kids, they do like, some of them I've seen kids do like 10 different drafts of that drawing that bird. And so they're really, really happy with it because they know it's going to become a permanent drawing on this like, you know, really nice piece of hardwood, and they're going to be selling them to raise money. And so it's like the kids become more invested in doing that work. It's really not that different than what they were doing beforehand, but with those younger kids, they get exposed to what the tools can do. And they know that they're producing a product that's going out and has a real use in the community. And so it you know, it's a natural investment tool, and it kids then, as they get older, you know, having done that thing in like first grade, then they get excited about, oh, like what else can I do? And so that it starts to build up from there to the point where they get to be in like 7th and 8th graders, and they're, you know, the student that Bobby was talking about earlier, or they start their own company making cribbage boards using the laser cutter because they've got ideas and they're driven. And so they've started to learn, like, this is what I can do. What else can I do?
There's, oh, go ahead, Ben.
So if you're doing these projects for the kids, are you perhaps then, as part of the educational process, making them then teach others via doing videos on how to do it or writing it out, and, you know, this type of thing? So it's a reinforcement for others to build.
Yeah, I would say we're not there yet. Yeah, so the question is, are we having students that are learning this stuff now starting to create instructional material for others? And that's been in my mind, and it's certainly something that I've thought about, but we're not there quite yet.
But I'm thinking as they move along,
Absolutely.
getting further, you know, up in grade level, that's part of it, and part of it is the writing skills just to do that.
Yeah, and it's an easy way to begin to have more integration. Is kids learn about something, they write about it, and ideally, like, we could have, you know, first graders creating documentation about their process that the next year's first graders get to, like, you know, see and be introduced to. You know, one of my little, like, sort of pipe dream, I'm full of pipe dream ideas, but like, I want students, our first graders also have like a building unit where they learn how to, like, how machines work and they build things. And I would really love for them to come up with questions that they want to ask contractors at a job site. I want them to go to a job site and probably have older students come along to help. And I want them to interview the contractors on the job site, and then probably then have older students take that footage and put together their own episodes of, like, This Old House. Yeah, and so, like, they become ways for us to, like, have older students like partnering with younger students. The younger students get to be like, that's so cool, I can't wait to do that when I'm that, you know, doing that. And it creates a real product. You know, so there's the whole gamut of, like, wonderful projects.
And there's a comment up there from Megan Welter, who's the Associate Commissioner of Education in the DOE. She said it is exciting to learn more about how St. George is working to provide CTE for all. As for the standards, an earlier question, the career and ed development standards will be reviewed in 2024. Make some changes there.
Could we scroll to the comment before too?
Sure.
Where that is? Oh. Marie, thank you for going out and talking about career opportunities. It looks like you're in high schools. And so please make sure that those high schoolers know there's lots of opportunities to make a difference, because they might not be doing this program, but those high schoolers, they're our future. So we make sure they know there's lots of opportunities.
Ray, do you want to, I mean, you don't have to, do you want to unmute yourself and just share that comment so everybody can hear it?
Hi, everyone. Yes, we have been going into the high school, mainly just Oceanside right now, but we are working on expanding that. And we are definitely talking with them about the opportunities out there, and that, you know, trades are just as important as a college degree. So we're just really trying to, you know, steer them in the direction that they want to go and just give them information about our community and the workforce and as they begin their job search.
Thank you very much. I think it brings up an important point that part of what we're trying to do in this process is respect to all the different pathways a student could take, whether it's job right out of high school, working for a company, starting their own company, getting their social security, going to a four-year college, advanced degree, whatever it might be. But understanding the value of all those pathways and not saying to students, this is the better one for you. Helping them to make that decision on their own. And Bob, can you tell that story that I love?
Which one? Yeah, there's so many. What's that?
Yeah, which Russell?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had a student that graduated a couple years ago, named Russell McKenna. I love to talk about Russell. He's just an incredible student. Attended Camden Hills Regional High School, and graduated from there. Russell applied originally for our welding program, and I got his application over the summer, and our welding program was full, but I started to really review his essay that he wrote for admission. And he said that he wanted to be an aeronautical engineer. So I gave him a call and asked him, what about aeronautical engineering was most interesting? We started talking about propulsion systems. I said, and we're really talking about mechanical engineering. So we started to get into that a little bit more. And I said, you know, machining would be a really kind of cool thing for you to check out. Have you thought about it? He said, well, my dad's tried to convince me to do that a bunch of times, but I'm not really there yet. So I invited him in, and he started to look around our machine tool classroom, and he just started to kind of light up. And it was a perfect combination. Russell is an incredible student, gifted academically. Took every AP class that he could take at Camden Hills. His senior year was taking AP Chem, and he took both AP Calc 1 and 2 at the same time while he was with us. And he had a childhood dream of working for both. And during this time here, he competed in our Skills USA competitions. And you talk about a student that he had done CNC machine work for about 6 months before he went to compete at the state level. And he won at the state level. So that qualified him for the national competition. And he went there and he placed 8th in the country against students that have been working on CNC mills and lathes for 4 years. While he was there, he talked to the people from Boeing because they're recruiting really the best of the best across the country, and they offered him an internship like that. He left there with multiple six-figure positions offered as a 17-year-old kid. He then applied to Wentworth for mechanical engineering. He left Wentworth because he was bored. Because he was walking into a machine shop with students that had been pushed academically, but had never been given an opportunity to explore a shop. And he was going to have to take intro to machine. Russell could teach intro to machine. And now he's at Colorado School of Mines. Haven't heard of the school, it's incredible. He's really focused on research and creating things that will benefit all of us, I'm sure, for years and years to come. But it is what happens when you have a top level academic education and the career and technical skills, and you combine those two, magic happens. And when we look at a lot of the careers that students are going to be stepping into, that's what they're going to be expected to be able to do, is be able to communicate with people, but also be able to do everything that need to with the technical skills too. And you don't have many Russells because a lot of those students aren't given the opportunity to come through our doors. And Russell has shattered those doors, and we're seeing more and more and more of those Russells walk through our doors, which is really encouraging for us to see.
I want the Russells to want to stay in Maine though.
Right.
I want Russell back here. I want him to be awesome here.
Mike, I'll just quickly, just a resource for people to look into. There's an incredible guy. I'm a huge fan of this guy named Kevin Fleming. He's a former dean and vice president of the community college out of California. He does this for a living. He talks to people about the importance and needs of career and technical education and the trades. And he just left his community college, and now he is in a strategic role for the LA system with 88 community colleges and who knows how many high schools. But he has incredible resources on his website. And if you're interested in that, please contact me and I'll provide you with those. But he talks a lot about the value of education and really having a purpose and purpose-driven education model where students aren't focused on just getting a diploma for graduation, that they have a purpose behind what they're doing. And we talk to our students a lot. The day that they start to understand that their education is something that they are in control of and it's not something that is being done to them, is going to be a great day. And when you look at the reasons for students dropping out, relevancy and boredom are two of the most significant factors. And those are things that we can fix when we start to look at education in a different way.
Any final questions? Any final points from the panel? Well, let's give the panel a round of applause. Thank you all for taking the time to come here and be part of this discussion. This is a discussion we're going to keep going. We have a lot of work to do. This is just one step in the process. We have a long way still to go. Thank you for being here. Please be careful in the parking lot. It's been obviously slippery with ice, so please be careful walking out there. But again, thank you for coming. If you have any questions, please feel free to come up. You can visit our website for more information about the project. I think there's some handouts too about that. So thank you all for being here. We appreciate it.
One more word.